In the name of God, the compassionate and merciful, I am very happy to be able to be here in person. For me, especially in the last 12 months, 13 months, every time I can travel is an extra blessing. So Alhamdulillah for that. We had very good presentation by Piero in the morning. I very much enjoyed, and I'm going to read it again afterwards to make sure that I understood everything. We had very good presentation also by Isra. So these two great presentations will hopefully help me to have a little humble contribution. Before I start my presentation, I would like to share a memory that I have said it on other occasions, but I don't know if everyone heard it. That when we were here in February 2015 with the group, and in the morning I referred to that. So at one occasion we went to the house of the priests in Chisa. And when we had a visit, then we were just going to leave, and one of the priests offered drink, and I was not feeling drinking at that time, which is very unusual. But at that time I didn't feel, I need to drink. But I said I should not refuse the invitation. So with Mahnaz, we went upstairs, and we were in a place was like the, I don't know, kitchen or something like that. And there were a few priests, maybe 3, 4. And when we were drinking, they asked me about my story with the movement. And when I was trying to explain to them and articulate my experience with movement, I understood some of the things better. And many times like this, when you want to explain to someone, you can better understand your own experience. And Paul also was with me, and he was, I think, recording. So I explained my understanding about movement, etc. Some of the things I mentioned in the first round of Wings of Unity was result of that, actually, reflection. And among the ideas that I mentioned to them was this idea that I am going to say. So I told them, in my understanding of Islam and the Quran, God, over the course of history, has sent different prophets, different messengers to different nations. And the Quran says, we have dispatched messenger to all nations. لَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا. They spoke different languages because they were supposed to speak according to the language of the people that they are sent to. So they spoke different languages. They addressed maybe different topics, and sometimes the same topics. But certainly they had to consider cultural context. It's not just a matter of speaking Arabic to Arab people. When you speak Arabic to Arab people, also you put lots of cultural attachments, and things into your speech. If you speak to a Greek person, you just don't speak Greek. You put lots of other elements, knowingly or unknowingly, Of course, the prophets were aware, but sometimes we are not aware, when we speak to someone. Therefore, they spoke differently, different languages, different cultural elements, plus sometimes different topics. And unfortunately, people lost the way to connect these messages with each other, and they thought these are totally different messages. They thought God has sent different religions. One of the things that in recent years I am trying to convince some of the people that I talk to from Muslim background is that God has sent only one religion and only one book. Because many of us have inherited this understanding of religions, that God has sent different religions. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, they have different founders, etc. So it's very understandable, although it is sad, that when time passes, you think that you are faced with different messages, different revelations, different prophets. Sometimes you say there are similarities, but some people don't notice similarities and they think they are actually conflicting with each other. They think there is, not only rivalry, but maybe even enmity and hostility. So for me, it's a very big mistake, huge mistake, that Muslims and Christians have sometimes been fighting. I hope God will forgive them, but I cannot understand how Muslims and Christians are fighting, or Sunni Shia fighting, or Catholics and Protestants fighting each other. I think this is a huge mistake in understanding God and fighting people of another tradition in the name of God. If they were saying we fight you in the name of power or money, was better. But they justify it by saying, based on Quran or Bible, I fight you. This is terrible. So, this is the way history has developed. But I said to the priest that my understanding is that in the end of the time, we will not have one school for Christians, one school for Jews, one school for Muslims, one under the Prophet Isa, Prophet Musa, Moses, and Prophet Muhammad. My understanding is that in the end of time, we will have only a school of God. One authority, one curriculum, different teachers. This was the maximum I had reached in that meeting. And then we maybe talked about other things, or we left, I don't remember. But this idea remained in my mind, and many times I referred back to this idea, try to understand it better. And I later heard about, a School of God from Focolare, and I heard about Pope Francis in Lopiano talking about the School of God, but I had forgotten that Pope Francis had said this about a School of God here. When today Piero referred to, I just remembered that. So I had forgotten the emphasis on a School of God, and I didn't know all these things that Piero said today about Chiara's speech and those elements. But soon after our last round, when we were communicating with Benny, after the discussion about Pact of Love, so I said maybe a good topic can be a School of God. And we had some communications back and forth, and then we decided. But now I better understand, that we should have chosen this as a topic. But at that time, even at some point, I said, I cannot explain more. If you are not happy, Piero, can suggest another topic. We talk about another topic. But Benny said that Piero is happy. So this is a little story about how we reached the idea of the School of God. And many times when I choose a topic for Wings of Unity is because of two reasons. One is that I have interest in that topic, and the second is that I think I don't know enough. So I suggest a topic which I have interest, but I want to know more. Yeah, it's different from when I choose a topic for community. Normally, if I choose a topic for community, something I have interest, I know the community needs that, and I have something prepared to say. But the beauty of Wings of Unity is that you don't need to be fully prepared. Yeah, because this is laboratory. We want to understand. And this is part of our preparation. It's another methodology. So even I was telling, I was telling Masuma that sometimes I, have interest in understanding, and I say, okay, we are going to talk about this, and I put myself on the spot, because now I have to say something. I have to prepare, and I trust that God is going to help us when we humbly, say that we have come for understanding. So, therefore, every time that we have Wings of Unity, thanks to God, we understand something better. Then we share with people, we reflect. But I think many of these topics can be revisited. And again, and again, we can discuss them. So my understanding would not be complete without listening to Piero and other colleagues. Even if I want to understand Islamic subject, I need to listen to someone that I have unity with, even if it doesn't belong to the same, tradition. So it's not that I need to listen to a Catholic perspective or a secular perspective. It's more than that. I need to listen to a Catholic perspective, but also this helps me with understanding the Quranic perspective, because God is at work in different places, in different traditions. And what I hear from Piero is not just Catholic perspective. I will explain later. I hear from someone who is a Catholic, committed Catholic, established theologian, but someone that is a student in the School of God. I believe people who are committed to unity and have transcended these boundaries are already students in the School of God. Yeah? So sometimes, for example, if there's a school which has great reputation and great, history and achievements, by meeting someone who excels in that field, you say, have you studied in that university or school? Yeah? You understand from the graduates where they have been studying. If it is a good educational system, or if it's a terrible, it's also the same. If someone is, for example, very rude person, so we know, for example, suppose in our city, this must be from this school, for example. Yeah? So now we are faced with people who are very divisive and sectarian. Okay? They can be Muslim, Christian, whatever, Jews, whatever. But we know that they are from a school of Satan. Because Satan is always dividing. Yeah? So, how can I understand someone has been in the school of God by reflecting the light of God, by showing love and mercy and respect, honoring people, working for unity, going above the boundaries. Okay? So when I look at, for example, Piero and my Focolare brothers and sisters, I know that they have been in the school of God. Okay? The same thing that I am thinking about Mariapolis. I said this before, that for me, every Mariapolis center is a piece of art from the same artist, from God. And therefore I want to visit them again and again. So if we are tuned into will of God and can sense the fragrance and the light coming from where God is at work, you can understand that someone is in the school of God or is not in the school of God. Either the school of Satan, has a very focused program to become, allies of Satan, or maybe they don't have any proper, education or organization. Take something from here, something. I'm not saying everyone is in the school of God or Satan. There are many people who are not necessarily belonging to any school. But those who are in the school of God, they have certainly some common characteristics, no matter whether they are Sunni or Shia or Catholic or Protestant. I'm not saying percentage-wise is the same, that God has 10% from this, 10% from this, or 20. No, it's not fixed. And this is a personal choice. Your tradition can facilitate, but cannot guarantee that you become a member of the school of God. So we are not talking about figures, but for sure you can find some people in all different traditions, especially about monotheistic and Abrahamic faith, that they have been trained by God. Of course, the school of God is different from formal schools, because sometimes God educates us when we think we are not being educated. Okay? For example, when we are traveling, when we are, having holidays, when we have break, when, for example, someone in family becomes ill, these are all parts of God's way of educating us. So God doesn't educate us only in a classroom. Whole life is part of God's education. Okay? So we shouldn't look for people who have formal education. Of course, if you have formal education, hopefully, can help, but sometimes formal education can actually create, confusion or arrogance, etc. So to be in the school of God means that in your life, without any partitioning, you have been trained by God and you have been cooperating with God, because cooperation is very important. God would never force people for this kind of education. He sends leaflets and invites people, but you have to register. And when you register, you say, how many days I have to come, how many hours? He says 7 days a week, 24 hours. This is the school of God, yeah? Your holidays can be actually very serious parts of this education. And your serious education can be just a holiday. For example, when I am in the seminary in Qom, actually that can be the easiest thing for me. I may think most of my education is, when I go to the class and, but actually that can be just my holidays. Because in a seminary to study the subject that I love with the people that, I can really relate to, with the teacher that I choose. I think that is serious education, but indeed that can be very, I don't want to underestimate it, but I'm saying that can be very easy part of education. And when I go, for example, to home and I want to have some maybe rest to get ready for studying, etc., and children, for example, are making noise, That can be my serious education. Yeah? My teacher can be my favorable, for example, professor. My teacher can be my angry neighbor. This is the way God, educates us. So you have to be prepared for every scenario to be taught by God. You cannot limit God and say, God, please only teach me when I am ready. When I have had, good rest and, sleep, I had my breakfast, I go to the classroom, teach me there. No. God can teach you anytime. Especially, it seems most of the time, God teaches us with creating scenarios which are surprising. And when you are not thinking that is something serious, actually it can be something very serious. We know, for example, how God trained Moses. The Quran says, God told Moses that I built you for myself. وَاصْطَنَعْتُكَ لِنَفْسِي. I built you for myself. But how did God build Moses for himself? Maybe in the palace of Pharaoh. Maybe when he acted as a shepherd for Prophet Shuaib. Maybe when he was very hungry and, some narration says that he was only eating the grass or, whatever vegetable was available for some time. And his skin was green because he had nothing else to. So God trained Moses with different things that some of them were not expected. And then when God wanted to give him his certificate, how he gave him certificate? He didn't say, okay, this is the invitation, come for graduation and we give you certificate. When in the winter, in a cold night, dark night, he was taking his wife and children or family somewhere and was very worried. Then he saw the fire. And he went to check the fire. Maybe he can, find some guidance or, maybe take some fire to warm his family. God started talking to him. So his way of telling Moses that you have now reached the level that we can appoint you as a prophet, it was not in a formal gathering by invitation. Even this was a test. If Moses was not very alert and had not taken that fire on the side seriously, he would have missed the opportunity. So God loves to always surprise us and always wants us to be alert. I think one of the greatest qualities that we need is to be alert. In the school of God, you have to be always alert. And, vigil. You should not be dismissing any opportunity. So, what I want to share, and I have different notes, but I ask God, to help me. It's very difficult to, share these points unless He helps. Let us start with some verses of the Quran. If Sister Slagi can put. Okay. I especially decided to talk about this verse because of your speech. I had put it on my notes before, but then I thought I must definitely mention this because you mentioned something very important, that the womb of God is the place for education. So here it doesn't use the same maybe language, but it's very interesting that God says, Ar-Rahman allama al-Quran. God has many names, but two names are at the top as proper nouns. as a specific, not as an adjective. One is Allah, one is Ar-Rahman. So Ar-Rahman and Allah are two proper nouns for God, not as an adjective, not as a quality. It can be used as adjective. So here, for example, they translate the all beneficent, but it doesn't need to say all beneficent because Ar-Rahman means God. No matter what God means. You know what I'm saying? So like, for example, sometimes someone's name is, for example, Jawad, like my son, for example, is Jawad. Jawad means generous, but you shouldn't translate Jawad because it's a proper noun. Yeah, you shouldn't translate it. You can say, okay, for example, from etymological perspective, it's coming from this. So, Ar-Rahman is proper noun for God. And the Quran says, they ask you, should they call God Allah or Ar-Rahman? It says, any. But what is interesting that among all qualities of God, Ar-Rahman is used as a proper noun for God, which comes from Rahmah. And Rahmah, as you know, is also the root for Rahim, for the womb. Yeah? And it is also very interesting that in chapter 19, which is about, called after Lady Mary, normally when God is mentioned in that chapter, or frequently, is Ar-Rahman, not Allah. In the chapter which is named after Lady Mary, many times Ar-Rahman is used. For example, when Lady Mary saw an angel as a human being and was afraid that this stranger, man may have, bad intention or whatever, said, "A'udhu bir-Rahman minka in kunta taqiyya." I take refuge with Ar-Rahman. So it's interesting that the chapter which has name of Lady Mary has Ar-Rahman more frequently mentioned. In any way, God says, Ar-Rahman allama al-Quran. God taught the Quran, but there is a reason why Ar-Rahman is chosen, because it comes from the root of Rahmah, and like womb also, mercy. It means we are in the womb of God, if you can use this expression, or we are surrounded by mercy of God, and out of His mercy and with His mercy and for His mercy, He taught us. Yeah? So the reason for teaching is mercy. What He teaches is also mercy. And what He wants us also to get is mercy. And all of this is possible to argue from the Quran. So, I use this, for example, a verse when I talk to the teachers who want to be trained, for teaching. I say we have to learn from this, that whenever you want to teach religion or the book, you should manifest God who is very merciful. Not God who is, for example, angry. Yeah? God who wants to punish, for example, the criminals. That is a scenario for certain time, but what is the common and the general scenario is that it should manifest your love. This is why mothers can be good teachers, because children see always love coming from mother. Therefore, they know that if mother asks them to do something, it's out of love. So, God, out of His mercy and for His mercy, taught the Quran. So God is a teacher. God has His own school, His own way of educating. And then says خَلَقَ الْإِنسان, created mankind. If you want to go chronologically, you should say God created mankind and taught the book. But because teaching is more important than creating. Had it not been that God has planned for guidance and education, he would not have created us. Yeah? It's not that God said, okay, let's create them, and then after some time said, now we need to educate them. No. He created us because he had planned for educating us. Okay? It's not that, like, for example, you make a school and then say, okay, now that we have this school, we should have some students to teach. No, you first have planned for teaching, then you make the school. Okay? So, God's first interest is not in just creating us. It's in educating us, teaching us. So, he taught the Quran. He created mankind. Again, he taught mankind how to communicate. So twice there is mention of God teaching. Once creating. He taught. He created, he taught. The first gives the content, so he gave us the content. And the second is he gave us the way to express ourselves. Because in the school of God, they will not just teach you. They will enable you to communicate. It's very interesting. Anyone who has studied under God should be a good communicator. Not necessarily through words. Can be through words, through actions. It's impossible that someone is a graduate of the school of God at some level, it never ends, and then has no impact, has no way of communicating what he or she has learned from God to others. So bayan is very important. Also, in another place, if you go to Surah Al-Alaq, اقرأ وربك الأكرم. The second passage is among the very first verses which were revealed. The very first time that the Prophet received the revelation, it starts with اقرأ. And it's very interesting because the Prophet was illiterate and the society of Mecca was a society in which literature was not important. The number of people who were able to read and write was less than maybe fingers and toes of one person. Oral presentation was very important for them, but not writing. So they had very good sense of poem or lecturing, but not writing, books, library, this kind of thing was not common. But the very first verse is, after Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, read. Not say, read. Read means there must be a text. Even if you read by heart, must be already a written text. Or at least in your mind, you have to shape a sentence with all the structure. Otherwise, you cannot say qara'a. Qara'a must be reading. So in that society, and for a person that himself, because of God's plan, he didn't go to any school, the very first verse says, اقرأ, read. In the name of your Lord, who has created mankind from cloth of blood. Again, اقرأ, read. وَرَبُّكَ الْأَكْرَمُ, and your Lord is the most honorable, the most generous. Why? This is important. Why God is the most generous and honorable? Because he taught how to use pen. Yeah. الذي علم بالقلم. He taught with the pen. So, emphasis on pen and reading and writing is unbelievable because there was nothing in that society or culture to suggest this. Okay? And we have also in Islamic theology the whole idea of qalam. There is another pen in the realm of creation, which is a very important level of making decision by God. So, God, because He is a teacher who teaches how to communicate, He is now described as Al-Akram. This shows the value of teachers, the value of teaching. Okay? So, God, who has mercy, has taught us, has educated us. The book, which is the content, and I'm going to talk about it more, but also ways of expressing. So this school of God helps you to be a good communicator, to express yourself, to express will of God with pen or with the tongue, or with your entire being, which we discuss about witness. A very good quality in the Quran, or high quality, is to be witness. Now, I want to talk a little bit about teaching Al-Quran. This teaching Al-Quran doesn't mean that Al-Quran versus Torah or in the Gospels or Torah. It means the book. Now, if we go to the Quran, we find something very interesting. Many times teaching the book comes with wisdom. Teaching the book and wisdom. So I mentioned some verses and Sister Isra will show and then I will comment. So if you can go to chapter 3, verse 48. Actually, this verse is about Jesus. God says that He teaches Jesus the book and wisdom and Torah and gospel. So, Torah and gospel are formal books, but there is Al-Kitab, the book, which is more common. This is actually one of the things that we discuss in COM and in some conferences, that according to the Quran, God has sent one book, and there are different editions. Al-Kitab is the common book that we are all supposed to believe in. So God taught Jesus the book and wisdom. I will come back to explain what is wisdom here. Another example, the same chapter, verse 164. Surah Al لقد من الله على المؤمنين. $164. إذ بعث فيهم رسولا. Okay. Here, God is talking about Prophet Muhammad. Actually, there are 4 verses that says one of the major tasks of Prophet Muhammad was to teach the book and wisdom. So God taught Jesus the book and hikmah, and then in turn, prophets are also supposed to teach people the book and wisdom. So there are 4 verses that talk about prophet teaching the book and wisdom. Okay? I don't then mention these 4, but for example, chapter 2, verse 151, chapter 2, verse 129, and Surah Al-Jumu'ah, verse 2. These are 4 verses that we have the book and wisdom, teaching the book and wisdom. The 5th was for Jesus. God taught him the book and wisdom. So we go to another verse. Chapter 4, verse 113. وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكَ وَرَحْمَتُهُ. So God says, we go to the second part of the verse. God sent down to you the book and wisdom. God says to the prophet, God sent down to you the book and wisdom and taught you what you were not able to understand. Also, chapter 2, verse 231, the beginning is about divorce, but then later God says in the same verse, remember the blessing of God upon you and what he sent down to you from the book and wisdom. And maybe we can go to the next one, which is again about Jesus. Chapter 5, verse 110. إذ قال الله يا عيسى ابن مريم اذكر نعمتي عليك وعلى والدتك. When God said to Jesus, remember the blessing that I had upon you and your mother. And God mentioned some of the miracles of Jesus. And then among his blessings on Jesus, God says, and when I taught you the book and wisdom. Similar to what we had before. Also, in chapter 3, verse 81, God says about all the prophets. This one is very interesting, guys, about all the prophets. وَإِذْ أَخَذَ اللَّهُ مِيثَاقَ النَّبِيِّينَ. God took covenant from all the prophets that when a book and wisdom comes and a messenger comes, you should affirm, because I have given you the book and wisdom. Also, John the Baptist, God says, take the book, and we gave him hok, which can mean wisdom. So, what does it mean? Some people have tried to explain that wisdom refers to some aspects of the teachings of religion. For example, practical laws of religion, practical instructions. But my understanding is that wisdom is the spirit of the book. Yeah. Is not a specific part of the book. The whole book is manifestation of wisdom. And this is why one of the things that God says about the Quran is, if you can go to Surah Zukhruf, وَإِنَّهُ فِي أُمِّ الْكِتَابِ لَدَيْنَا لَعَلِيٌّ حَكِيمٌ. God says that we have sent down the book in Arabic so that people can understand, but the Quran is with us. The book is with us. So the book has not been sent down to us by departing the kingdom of God. Yeah? When God sends down something, it doesn't mean that he no longer has it. It's not like rain. When rain comes, it's no longer in the sky. Yeah? But when God sends down the book, still the reality of the book is with God. So he says, وَإِنَّهُ فِي أُمِّ الْكِتَابِ. It is with us in the mother book. And the Quran is high and Hakim, wise. So the whole book is wisdom. The whole book is wisdom. Manifestation of wisdom of God. So what do we understand from this? What we understand is that no matter whether God is talking to us through Torah or through Gospel or through the Quran, or whether the teacher that God is using is Moses or Jesus or Prophet Muhammad or someone who is under them, the main thing to learn in this school is wisdom. If you learn wisdom, you can graduate. If you remain unwise, you cannot graduate. Either you have to repeat, or they will refuse and say, no, we don't register you anymore. You don't have interest in wisdom. So, the sign of being a good learner is that you must learn wisdom. And learning wisdom is maybe one of the most difficult things, because it's not something that you can read 1,000 times and repeat and then memorize. Yeah? I can memorize wise sayings of people, but I don't become wise. Yeah? I can collect wise sayings of saints and great thinkers, but this doesn't make me wise. I have to become wise. Okay? Therefore, God has his own way of teaching you the wisdom, which is not through only a formal classroom. It's not only through reading and learning, as Sister Isra mentioned. ليس العلم بكثرة التعليم والتعلم وبكثرة. It's not a matter of just taking lesson and studying. That is there. But you have to learn wisdom in real life scenarios. I can go to a class and learn wisdom, not necessarily, but for example, what my teacher is telling me, but for example, by learning how he teaches, how the teacher deals with other students, how a good student deals with another student. There can be lots of potentials for learning wisdom that you can easily miss if you don't tune yourself. You think you have come here to learn something else. You think you have come here to learn some technical terms, some theories, some equations, to fill your mind, not knowing that God wants to make his channel open between heart and mind. God works with both heart and mind, not just mind. And not mind first and heart second. Sometimes we say, okay, mind and heart, but mind first, heart second. But it seems it's more priority to heart, but at the same time, educating your heart with good information, good knowledge. But God directly, I think, works on the heart. And all people of God work directly on the heart plus mind, but not mind plus heart. Heart is the main thing. So, I have something to say about some aspects of God's teaching and educating, but I leave it aside because I have already talked a lot. I mentioned just one point, and that is a reflection about what can be part of God's education, I hope. Because for a school of God, I think very important and central part of wisdom is to be able to see what is uniting. You don't need to be wise to see differences. But you need to be wise to see the commonalities and prioritize them. Yeah? A wise husband, a wise wife, for example, they can see differences, but they appreciate what is common between them and they live happily together. But if you are not wise and you want, those differences to disappear, you will have problem in marriage. Yeah? So, a sign of wisdom definitely is how to be able to see commonalities and common patterns against diversity and differences, so that you can be more reflecting the God who is one than these differences. So, what I was thinking is that maybe in our experience of working with, Focolare at different stages, dialogue and unity, wings of unity, all these years, maybe what has happened is like this. That first, for example, I saw in Chiara and then her community that they must belong to the school of God, even if they were not Muslims. Okay? Because I saw God at work in them. So they must have learned from God. Then I tried to introduce them to my people, because I love the work of God and I love to see that God has worked in other people. I'm grateful to God to see that there is such a beauty of unity here. And then I took them to see Focolare, or I invited Focolare to talk to them about this work of God. In a way, what I am doing is I am trying to connect a class that I am teacher of it, inshallah, God willing, if I am accepted by God as being a good teacher. I am trying to tell this class, this group, how God has acted with a good teacher in another part of the world, and another tradition. Yeah? I cannot separate this and be honest. I cannot be a good servant of God, a grateful servant of God, and don't see this beauty, and don't see that I need this, and my people need this. Because otherwise, I don't have problem with Chiara, I have problem with God. It's not between me and, for example, Chiara or Piero or Benny. It's between me and God, because I see God here at work. Okay? So, you also, for example, asked me to teach here. Piero asked me, for example, to teach here, when I came. And then we talked about Wings of Unity. So, God is working for unity. He has a pocket of people here, a pocket maybe here. I'm not talking about number, etc. Just in different traditions, there are people who are interested in unity. Means they are students in the school of God. Because anyone who has interest in unity is a school in the school of God. Primary or intermediate, that's another thing. But you cannot be working honestly for unity unless you are in the school of God. And you cannot continue to be in the school of God unless you devote yourself to working for unity. The day you say we don't need to work for unity means you are not in the school of God. Okay? So, then we reached the point that after knowing each other, we made pact of unity. We started Wings of Unity. What does it mean? Now it means that no longer my teaching would be complete without having Piero, Benny, others, with me. Because now God has a joint program for us. Now we are completing. I was telling Rita that in my understanding, I cannot do anything for educating even my own Shia brothers and sisters without introducing Focolare to them. This is my honest commitment to the pact of love and unity. So even if I teach online or teach in Qom, in person, I have to introduce Focolare to them. I have to take them to different places to see. Even I don't feel now there's necessity of having a Shia Maria police or Fatima police. We can have it together. Yeah, because I think in the school of God, we have reached a level that God has assigned us a joint task. We were teaching separately, but inviting each other, introducing, talking. But now, maybe after this pact, now we have been given a joint task by God. And therefore, now I am trying to train especially some clerics to know about focolare, to learn Italian language, to learn about spirituality of focolare, and see how, with having two teaching teams, one Shia team, one focolare team, they can grow. Yeah? This is very important. This is not something that I should be hesitant or dismiss. Sometimes people are hesitant to say, we need you to teach, for example, our people. But I'm not hesitant. I say, we need you to teach our people. Why? Because we are in the school of God. Yeah? If you are in the same school, you don't feel bad to ask another teacher, come and teach my students. So, now that we are either bringing people for short term or for example, a degree here, it means that we are sharing resources in the school of God. The resources of the school of God should be shared. But I hope we will move forward, and after mastering this stage, that we will be very comfortable with this stage, and after having people who have been trained in both traditions, then we should have a kind of educational program. Of course, not just formal, but with the whole idea of life. Because as we said in the morning, it's not just Sophia, it's the whole Mariapolis, it's the whole life. But part of it is formal education part. I hope in future we can reach the point that we can have a kind of environment, a godly environment, that everyone who is trained enough, because it never finishes, but everyone who is trained enough in the school of God and has dedicated his or her talents and life to learning and educating people about unity, they can feel they are part of it, not as a guest. Because if something belongs to God, you should not feel you are a guest. You should feel at home. To be guest is good, it's very good, but when I go to a mosque, I shouldn't feel I'm a guest. I should feel I'm at home, if it's belonging to God. If I feel I'm a guest, it's like I have gone to the house of my aunt. I'm sure they will give me good treatment, but I don't feel at home in my aunt's house. Anything that belongs to God, you should feel at home. So we should have this environment that everyone feels at home, but not at home in the sense that it's my home, not your home. Because again, this is not for God. Yeah? It means our home. This is our home. And we bring our resources, we educate together, but we don't confuse people. So we can have a program. I think that would be, for me, something very ideal. Not final ideal, but something high. For example, we have a place that if someone wants the best education of Shia Islam, can come there. If someone wants the best education about Catholic tradition, can come there. No one would say they have diluted, they have compromised, they don't know these, technical or very, precise things. No. The best Shia tradition can be taught there, but people who are committed. the best Catholic tradition, for example. But it's one body, united body, that governs this. And then you realize that when I want to train the best, for example, Shia clerics, for example, or best Catholic clerics in this place, then I would realize by passage of time that actually 10-20% are exclusive. Just distinctively Shia or distinctively Catholic. Why? Because the main thing that we want to teach in the school of God is wisdom. And wisdom is not what I learn in a class about Shia Islam, or you learn in a class about Catholic Church. Wisdom is what we learn in the whole life. And the best chances of learning wisdom is when we are together. And we run it together. And we go outside the classroom, we live together, we work together. If you want to work on our traits of character, because one discussion is that wisdom has to be translated into traits of character. You cannot be wise and not honest. You cannot be wise and not fair. You cannot be wise and not humble. Do I need to train Shia, for example, seminarians to be humble and fair separately? And you teach Catholic seminarians to be honest and humble and fair separately? No. Maybe there is a Catholic or even Orthodox or a Sunni, I don't know, someone who is dedicated to God and work for unity, that we can say for this issue, this person can be teaching. All of us. Yeah? So, for example, I was thinking, if Prophet Muhammad was responsible for in the school, not only he would invite Jesus to teach, but he would invite any Christian, true Christian, who can teach people, maybe better than Muslims who are available, how to be fair, how to be loving people. There's no problem because there is no bias here. Whoever is from the same camp of God and can better handle this subject is based on the merits, not based on the titles. So, I hope we are moving to that direction, that we can have an environment which is holistic, is whole life, with all the challenges of life, and learn together how to gain wisdom by benefiting from teachers who don't just give us theoretical lessons, but give us real life lessons. And everyone would feel at home, and everyone feels at home that there are others who are there. You don't feel troubled that there are other people around. Because if you are in the house of God, you should feel at home, and also you should allow other people feel at home. I cannot, be in the house of God and feel worried